Her. She had been avoiding it, knowing that seeing it would only make things worse. But now she couldn't stop thinking about it. Her fingers ached to feel keys beneath them again. At 2 in the morning, Elena made a decision. She crept out of her tiny room and down the back stairs. The mansion was dark and silent. Everyone was asleep. Her heart pounded as she made her way to the ballroom. The piano sat there in the moonlight streaming through the windows, majestic and beautiful. Elena approached it like it was a sacred altar. She lifted the cover slowly, carefully. The keys gleamed white and black, perfect and untouched. She sat down on the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys, trembling. What if Sophie's hands couldn't do it? What if all her training and talent were trapped in a body that was back in Moscow? Or gone completely? She pressed down on middle C. The note rang out pure and clear in the silent room. It was the most beautiful sound she had heard in weeks. Then she began to play. Just simple scales at first, testing what this body could do. Sophie's hands were smaller than Elena's had been. Less trained, but they could move. They could learn. She played for an hour, keeping the volume soft, her foot barely touching the pedal. She played exercises, then simple pieces, then more complex ones. Her muscle memory was gone, but her knowledge was still there. She knew every note, every technique. She just had to teach these new hands how to execute them. It was like being a beginner again, except she had the mind of a master, frustrating and exhilarating at the same time. A floorboard creaked behind her. Elena's hands froze on the keys. She turned around slowly, expecting to see Mrs. Thornton ready to fire her on the spot. But it was Adrian Blackwood standing in the doorway, wearing a robe, his hair messy from sleep. He was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "I heard music," he said quietly. "I thought I was dreaming." Elena stood up quickly, her face burning. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Blackwood. I shouldn't have. I'll go back to my room right now. Please don't fire me." He walked closer, looking at her with those sharp, intelligent eyes. "You play piano?" "A little. I'm sorry. I know I'm not supposed to touch it." That wasn't a little. That was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. Most people can't play that piece even with years of lessons. He was standing right in front of her now. "Where did you learn?" Sophie's memories gave her nothing. The original Sophie had never learned piano, had never even touched one. Elena had to think fast. "My mother taught me some things before she died. Just basic stuff. I've been teaching myself from videos online when I have time." It was a weak lie, but it was all she had. Adrian studied her face for a long moment. "Play something else. Mr. Blackwood, I really should go. It's late and I have work in the morning." "That's an order, not a request." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Play." Elena sat back down. Her hands were shaking now, but not from fear. From relief. Someone was asking her to play. Someone wanted to hear her music. She played Debussy's Clair de Lune. It was one of her favorite pieces, beautiful and haunting. She poured everything into it, all her frustration, her sadness, her longing for her old life. The notes filled the ballroom like moonlight itself. When she finished, there was silence. She was afraid to look at Adrian. "Who are you, really?" he asked softly. Elena turned to face him. "I'm just Sophie, a maid. Nobody important. Nobody plays like that without serious training. That's not something you learn from online videos." He sat down on a nearby chair. "You're either lying to me or someone taught you very well and then you ended up here. Which is it? Does it matter?" Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. "I'm here now. This is my life. Playing piano doesn't pay off medical debts or put food on the table." Adrian was quiet for a moment. "The charity gala in 2 weeks. Would you like to play at it?" Elena's heart stopped. "What?" "We're having a professional perform, yes, but there's always a cocktail hour before the main event. Someone plays background music while guests arrive. Usually we hire someone, but..." He looked at her thoughtfully. "I think you could do it. Mrs. Thornton would never allow it. Mrs. Thornton works for me, not the other way around." Adrian stood up. "Think about it. You'd be paid extra, of course. Might help with those debts you mentioned." Before Elena could respond, he walked out, leaving her alone in the ballroom with her thoughts racing. The next morning, everything fell apart. Elena was carrying a tray of breakfast dishes to the kitchen when Victoria deliberately stepped into her path. The collision was intentional and obvious. The tray flew from Elena's hands and expensive china shattered across the marble floor. Mrs. Thornton appeared instantly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Sophie Chen." That's the third time this month. Do you have any idea how much these plates cost? She walked right into me, Elena protested. It wasn't my fault. Victoria gasped dramatically. Are you calling me a liar? I was just walking to the pantry and she crashed right into me. The other maids had gathered around, watching the show. Some looked sympathetic, but most just seemed entertained. I don't care whose fault it was, Mrs. Thornton snapped. Those plates are coming out of your salary. All of them. That's $300? $300. That was most of what Elena earned in a month. She felt rage building inside her, hot and fierce. The old Sophie would have apologized and accepted it. But Elena had spent 28 years fighting to be the best, refusing to let anyone push her down. No, she said clearly. The kitchen went completely silent. What did you say? Mrs. Thornton's face was turning red. I said no. Elena stood up straighter. Victoria deliberately made me drop that tray. Everyone saw it. And I'm not paying for her games anymore. How dare you speak to me like that? I'll have you fired immediately. Then fire me. Elena's voice was steady now, strong. But I'm not paying for something I didn't do. I've been working here for months and I've taken your insults and your unfair treatment because I needed this job. But I won't be a doormat anymore. Mrs. Thornton looked like she might explode. We'll see what Mr. Adrian has to say about this. Yes, let's ask him. Adrian's voice came from the kitchen entrance. Nobody had noticed him standing there. Let's ask him what he thinks about his head housekeeper allowing staff members to bully and frame each other. Mrs. Thornton's face went pale. Mr. Adrian, she's always been clumsy and I saw the whole thing from the hallway. Victoria deliberately caused the accident. Adrian's gaze swept across the room. Sophie will not be paying for those plates. Victoria will be, and she'll receive a formal warning. If anything like this happens again, there will be terminations. He looked at Elena. My office. Now. Elena followed him, her heart pounding. Behind her, she could hear the shocked whispers of the other maids. In his office, Adrian closed the door and turned to face her. I want you to play at the gala. Not as background music, as the featured performer before the main event. 30 minutes, whatever pieces you want. Mr. Adrian, I can't. You stood up for yourself back there. I've been watching you these past few weeks since that night in the ballroom. You're different from the other staff. There's something in you that won't stay buried. He leaned against his desk. I don't know your story, Sophie. I don't know why someone with your talent is working as a maid, but I know potential when I see it, and I'm offering you a chance. Elena looked at this man who barely knew her but was willing to bet on her. Maybe this new life wasn't just punishment. Maybe it was opportunity. I'll do it, she said. I'll play at your gala, Adrian smiled. Good. Now let's get you a proper practice schedule. You'll need time with that piano every day. As Elena left his office, she felt something she hadn't felt since waking up in Sophie's body. Hope. The 2 weeks before the gala passed in a blur. Every morning, Elena woke at 5 to do her regular maid duties. But now Adrian had arranged for her to practice piano for 2 hours every afternoon. Mrs. Thornton hated it, but she couldn't say anything. The order came directly from the master of the house. Elena practiced like her life depended on it. Sophie's hands were learning fast, getting stronger and more precise with each passing day. She worked through technical exercises, then moved on to the pieces she planned to perform. Her favorite was still Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written, but it was also the most beautiful. Victoria and the other maids whispered behind her back constantly. They called her a show-off, said she was trying to seduce Adrian, predicted she would embarrass herself and the entire household. Elena ignored them. She had dealt with jealous competitors her entire career. These petty games were nothing new. What was new was Adrian. He started coming to listen to her practice sessions. At first, he would just stand in the doorway for a few minutes before leaving. Then he began staying longer, sitting in one of the chairs watching her fingers move across the keys. Sometimes they would talk afterward about music, about life, about dreams. Why did you give up on music? He asked her one afternoon. You're good enough to be professional. Elena chose her words carefully. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. My mother got sick. There were bills. Music became a luxury I couldn't afford. And if you could afford it now, if someone gave you the chance? She looked at him, this wealthy man who had everything handed to him since birth. Some chances come too late, Mr. Adrian. It's never too late, he said firmly. And stop calling me Mr. Adrian, just Adrian is fine. The night of the gala arrived. The mansion was transformed into something magical. Flowers everywhere, candles glowing, crystal and silver shining under the chandeliers. Guests in expensive suits and designer gowns began arriving at 7. These were the wealthiest people in the city, all coming together for Adrian's charity that provided music lessons to children who couldn't afford them. Elena was supposed to perform at 8 o'clock, before the main event. She wore a simple black dress that Adrian had bought for her, nothing fancy but elegant enough. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she waited backstage in a small room near the ballroom. Victoria appeared in the doorway with a nasty smile. Nervous? You should be. There are 300 people out there. Important people. People who will recognize a fraud when they hear one. Get out, Elena said quietly. I hope you fall on your face. I hope you hit every wrong note. I hope they laugh you off that stage. Victoria's eyes were full of venom. You think you're special because Adrian gave you attention? You're still just a maid. That's all you'll ever be. After Victoria left, Elena sat alone with her thoughts. Maybe Victoria was right. Maybe this was crazy. She had been one of the best pianists in the world. But that was in another body, another life. What if Sophie's hands couldn't handle the pressure? What if she failed? A knock on the door interrupted her spiral of doubt. Adrian entered looking handsome in his tuxedo. 5 minutes, he said. Then he saw her face. You're terrified. What if I mess up? What if I embarrass you in front of all your guests? Adrian sat down beside her. Do you know why I started this charity? When I was 10, my parents forced me to take piano lessons. I hated it. I had no talent, no passion. My teacher was patient, but we both knew I was hopeless. One day, she brought her daughter to the lesson. This girl was 8 years old and she could barely afford shoes. But when she sat at that piano and played, it was like watching magic. She had more talent in her little finger than I had in my whole body. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. I asked my father to sponsor her education. He laughed and said talent without proper breeding was worthless. That girl never got the training she deserved. I don't even know what happened to her. But I promised myself that when I had my own money, I would make sure talented kids got their chance, regardless of where they came from. Adrian turned to look at Elena. You remind me of her. That same fire, that same gift. You belong on that stage more than anyone else here tonight. So stop doubting yourself and show them what real talent looks like. Before Elena could respond, he stood and left. 2 minutes later, an assistant came to get her. It was time. The walk to the stage felt like walking to her own execution. The ballroom was packed with people in glittering clothes, holding champagne glasses, talking and laughing. They barely noticed as she made her way to the piano. Adrian was standing near the front. He caught her eye and nodded. Elena sat at the Steinway, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. The room continued buzzing with conversation. These people weren't here to listen to the opening act. They were here to socialize and be seen. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. She started with something gentle. Debussy's Arabesque No. 1. It was beautiful and flowing, meant to be pleasant background music. The conversations continued. People weren't really listening, but Elena didn't care. She let the music flow through her, feeling the joy of performing again. When the first piece ended, there was polite applause, but most people went right back to talking. She began her second piece, Chopin's Ballade No. 1. This was more dramatic, more emotional. A few people near the front started paying attention. The conversations grew a bit quieter. For her final piece, Elena made a decision. She was supposed to play something safe and pleasant. But suddenly, she didn't want to play it safe. If this was her only chance to perform, she was going to do it right. She began Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, just the piano part, without the orchestra, but played with every ounce of skill and passion she possessed. The effect was immediate. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. Every single person in that ballroom turned to look at her. This piece was a monster, demanding incredible technical skill and deep emotional expression. Elena's fingers flew across the keys, Sophie's small hands stretching and reaching for notes that seemed impossible. She played the thundering bass lines, the delicate high melodies, the crashing chords that felt like waves hitting rocks. She forgot about being Sophie. She forgot about being Elena. She was just music, pure and complete. The piece built to its climax, her hands moving so fast they were almost a blur. Sweat dripped down her face. Her arms ached, but she couldn't stop. This was what she was born to do. The final notes rang out, powerful and clear, echoing through the stunned silence of the ballroom. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed, then the room exploded. People leaped to their feet, applauding wildly. Some were crying. Others were shouting, "Bravo," over and over. It was the kind of standing ovation usually reserved for the greatest performers in the world. Elena stood up, her legs shaking, hardly able to believe what had just happened. She bowed, and the applause grew even louder. Adrian was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Wonder, confusion, something else? But before she could figure it out, chaos erupted. The evening's main performer, the famous Italian pianist Lorenzo Ferretti, came storming into the ballroom. He was clearly drunk, his face red, his words slurred. "This is an insult," he shouted. "You bring me here, the great Lorenzo Ferretti, to perform after some servant girl? You humiliate me like this." Adrian moved quickly to intercept him. "Maestro Ferretti, please, if we could just talk privately. I will not perform in this house. I will not be disrespected." Lorenzo was making a scene, and all the guests were watching with horrified fascination. "You can keep your money. I'm leaving." And he did. He stormed out of the mansion, his assistant running after him, leaving 300 confused guests and a gala with no main performance. Adrian's sister Isabella rushed over to him, panic in her eyes. "What do we do? Everyone's expecting a full concert. The charity was counting on this evening. We can't just cancel." People were starting to murmur. Some were heading toward the doors. The entire event was falling apart. Elena watched from near the piano, still breathing hard from her performance. This gala meant everything to Adrian. His charity needed the money. Those kids needed their music lessons. She walked over to where Adrian stood with his sister and several board members of the charity. Everyone was talking at once, trying to figure out what to do. "I can do it," Elena said quietly. Adrian turned to her. "What? I can perform the full concert. Another hour of music. I know enough pieces." "Sophie, that was incredible, but a full concert is different. These people paid a lot of money. They're expecting a world-class performer." Elena looked him straight in the eye. "Then that's what I'll give them." Adrian studied her face for a long moment. She could see him weighing the options, calculating the risks. His reputation was on the line. His charity was on the line. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, do it." Isabella looked like she might faint. "Adrian, are you insane?" "Maybe," he said. "But I trust her." Adrian stepped to the center of the ballroom and raised his hands for silence. The murmuring crowd quieted down. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you saw, Maestro Ferretti has unfortunately had to leave due to a personal emergency. However, we are incredibly fortunate to have discovered a remarkable talent right here in our own home. Sophie Chen has agreed to perform the full concert this evening. I promise you, you will not be disappointed." Some people looked skeptical. Others looked intrigued. A few were already taking out their phones. Elena walked back to the piano and sat down. This was it. This was her moment to prove that talent could come from anywhere. That Sophie Chen the maid deserved to be heard just as much as Elena Morrison, the famous pianist, ever had. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play. And for the next hour, she gave the performance of a lifetime. The hour-long concert passed like a dream. Elena played everything she could remember. Beethoven, Chopin, Liszt, Rachmaninoff. Her fingers ached, her back hurt, but she kept going. The audience was completely silent except for the occasional gasp or sigh. When she finally played the last note, the standing ovation lasted for 10 minutes straight. People rushed to congratulate Adrian, telling him he had discovered a genius. Others asked where this Sophie Chen had trained, why they had never heard of her before. Adrian just smiled and said she preferred to keep her past private. But something neither of them expected was already happening. At least 50 people had recorded parts of her performance on their phones. By the time the guests left at midnight, videos of the mysterious maid pianist were spreading across social media like wildfire. Elena woke up the next morning to find her small room crowded with other maids, all staring at their phones. "Sophie, you're famous," one of them exclaimed. "Look at this. 2 million views already." Elena grabbed the phone and stared. There she was, playing Rachmaninoff, her face intense with concentration. The comments were overwhelming. People were calling her incredible, a prodigy, a mystery. Classical music websites were writing articles. Who is Sophie Chen? The maid who plays like a master. Unknown pianist stuns high society. Victoria stood in the doorway, her face twisted with jealousy. Don't let it go to your head. You got lucky, that's all. One good performance doesn't make you special. But Victoria was wrong. This was just the beginning. Over the next week, the videos kept spreading. News outlets picked up the story. Classical music magazines wanted interviews. 3 different talent agencies called the mansion asking to represent Sophie Chen. Adrian had to hire someone just to handle all the requests. Then came the offer that changed everything. The Leeds International Piano Competition, one of the most prestigious competitions in the world, invited her to compete. They had seen the videos and wanted to give her a chance, even though the registration deadline had passed months ago. Adrian came to find Elena while she was cleaning the upstairs hallway. We need to talk. My office, now. She followed him, her heart pounding. Was he angry about all the attention? Did he regret letting her perform? In his office, Adrian handed her a formal letter. Read this. It was the invitation to Leeds. Elena's hands trembled as she read the words. This competition was one of the biggest in the world. Winners got recording contracts, concert tours, international recognition. This was the kind of opportunity that could change someone's life forever. I can't, she whispered. I'm not ready. I haven't trained properly in months. I'm just a maid who plays piano, not a professional competitor. Stop saying that. Adrian's voice was firm. Stop calling yourself just a maid. You're one of the most talented pianists I've ever heard. And I've heard a lot of them. But the competition is in 6 weeks. I need to practice, prepare, learn new pieces, and then do it. I'll arrange everything. You can practice full-time. I'll cover your expenses, travel, accommodation, everything. Elena looked at him in shock. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. Adrian walked around his desk and stood in front of her. Because when I look at you, I see someone who deserves a chance. Because you work harder than anyone I've ever met. Because your talent shouldn't be wasted scrubbing floors. He paused. And because I believe in you. There was something in his eyes, something warm and genuine that made Elena's heart skip. This wasn't just about charity anymore. This was personal. Okay, she said softly. I'll do it. Adrian smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she had known him. Good, we start tomorrow. I'm hiring you a coach, someone who can help prepare you properly. But not everyone was happy about Elena's sudden rise. That evening, she returned to her room to find it destroyed. Her few possessions were scattered everywhere. Her clothes were torn, and worst of all, someone had written on her mirror in lipstick, "You don't belong here. You never will." Elena knew immediately who had done it. Victoria and Mrs. Thornton. They had been seething with jealousy for weeks. She went straight to Adrian. When he saw the damage, his face went dark with anger. Pack your things, he said. What's left of them? You're not staying in the servants' quarters anymore. Where will I go? There are 10 guest rooms in this mansion. You'll take one of them. From now on, you're not a maid. You're a pianist in residence. Mrs. Thornton was fired that night. Adrian had been reviewing the household accounts and found exactly what Elena had suspected weeks ago. Mrs. Thornton had been stealing from the family for years. Thousands of dollars skimmed off grocery bills, supply orders, and maintenance expenses. With Elena's rise bringing attention to the household, Adrian had finally looked closely at the records. Victoria was fired too, not for the vandalism, which couldn't be completely proven, but for creating a hostile work environment. Multiple other maids came forward with stories of Victoria's bullying once they knew it was safe to speak up. Elena should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt exhausted. She moved into a beautiful guest room with a view of the gardens. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was still an outsider, still someone who didn't truly belong. The next 6 weeks were the hardest of Elena's life, harder even than her original training as Elena Morrison. She practiced 8 hours a day, working with a brilliant coach named Professor Huang who pushed her to her absolute limits. Sophie's hands grew stronger, more precise, more confident, but there was always doubt lurking in the back of her mind. What if she failed? What if this body couldn't handle the pressure of real competition? Adrian was there through all of it. He listened to her practice sessions, brought her dinner when she forgot to eat, talked her through her moments of panic. Slowly, without either of them quite realizing it, something was growing between them. One evening, 2 weeks before the competition, they were sitting in the library. Elena was resting her sore hands and Adrian was reading through business reports. The silence was comfortable, easy. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said suddenly. "Who are you really, Sophie?" Elena's heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you showed up in my house as a maid, but you play piano like someone who's trained their entire life. You speak about music with knowledge that goes beyond what any amateur would have. Sometimes when you talk, it's like you're someone else, someone with years of experience and education." He set down his papers and looked at her. "I'm not stupid. There's more to your story." Elena wanted to tell him the truth. She wanted to explain about waking up in Sophie's body, about being Elena Morrison, about the impossible situation she was in. But how could she? He would think she was insane. "My mother was a pianist," she said instead. It was half true. Sophie's mother had played a little, according to her memories. "She taught me everything before she got sick. Music was our escape from poverty, from struggle. When she died, I had to give it up. But it never left me. It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough." Adrian reached across and took her hand. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. But I'm grateful that music brought you here. Brought you to me." Elena looked at their joined hands, feeling her heart race. "Adrian, I know this is complicated. I know I'm your employer, that there's this huge gap between our worlds. But I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since that first night I heard you playing." His eyes were intense, honest. "Tell me I'm not alone in feeling this." "You're not alone," Elena whispered. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, full of promise and hope. When they pulled apart, Elena felt tears on her cheeks. "After the competition," Adrian said, "whatever happens, we'll figure this out together. Okay?" "Okay." The day finally came to leave for Leeds. Adrian insisted on coming with her, along with Professor Huang. As they boarded the private plane Adrian had chartered, Elena looked back at the mansion that had been her prison and then her salvation. In Leeds, the competition was fierce. Pianists from 30 countries, all incredibly talented, all fighting for the top prize. Elena recognized some of them from her former life as Elena Morrison. One competitor in particular, a brilliant pianist named Yuki Tanaka, had been Elena's biggest rival in the classical music world. Yuki had come in second to Elena at the Tchaikovsky competition, but Yuki didn't recognize Sophie Chen. Why would she? This was a different body, a different person. The preliminary rounds went well. Elena made it through each stage, her confidence growing. Adrian was there for every performance, sitting in the audience, giving her strength just by being present. Finally, she reached the finals. Only 3 pianists remained: herself, Yuki, and a young prodigy from Germany named Klaus. For the final round, each pianist had to perform a concerto with the orchestra. Elena had chosen the piece that had won her the Tchaikovsky competition in her previous life, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. The night before the final performance, Elena couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of her hotel room, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how far she had come. From waking up confused in a tiny servant's room, to standing on the edge of international recognition. A knock on the connecting door made her turn. Adrian entered, wearing pajamas, his hair messy. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked, too nervous. "Tomorrow decides everything." He came to stand beside her at the window. "You're going to be amazing. You know that, right?" "I hope so." Elena leaned her head against his shoulder. "Adrian, no matter what happens tomorrow, I want you to know that you changed my life. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Sophie," he said gently, turning her to face him, "I love you. I've been trying not to say it, trying to wait for the right time, but I can't hold it in anymore. I love you." Elena felt her heart overflow. "I love you too." They kissed again, longer this time, deeper. And for the first time since waking up in this strange new life, Elena felt completely at home. Tomorrow she would compete. Tomorrow she would face her past rival and show the world what Sophie Chen could do. But tonight she was just a woman in love, held in the arms of a man who saw her true worth. The final round awaited. And Elena was ready. The morning of the final round arrived with gray skies and cold rain. Elena stood backstage at the Leeds Town Hall listening to the orchestra warm up. Her stomach was in knots. In 2 hours she would walk onto that stage and perform in front of thousands of people and judges who would decide her fate. The other two finalists were there too. Klaus, the German prodigy, looked calm and confident. He was only 19 but had already won several major competitions. Then there was Yuki Tanaka. She stood apart from everyone, her eyes closed, clearly visualizing her performance. Elena remembered competing against her before, remembered how fierce and talented Yuki was. A stagehand approached Elena. "Miss Chen? You're performing last after Miss Tanaka. You have about 90 minutes. Elena nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She found a quiet corner and tried to calm her racing heart. This was it. Everything she had worked for, everything she had survived had led to this moment. Adrian found her there, pacing back and forth. "Hey," he said softly. "Talk to me. What if I'm not good enough? What if Sophie's hands can't do what my mind remembers? What if I fail and prove Victoria right? That I'm just a maid who got lucky?" Adrian took both her hands in his. "Look at me. You are not just lucky. You are not just a maid. You are Sophie Chen, and you are one of the most talented pianists in the world. You've already proven that. But Yuki is incredible. She's won almost every competition she's entered. And Klaus is a genius, and so are you." Adrian squeezed her hands. "Stop comparing yourself to them. You're not competing against them. You're competing to show the world who you really are. So go out there and play like your life depends on it. Because in a way it does. This is your rebirth, Sophie. Your chance to become who you were always meant to be." His words steadied her. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, I can do this, and I know you can. I'll be in the audience, right in the front row. When you get nervous, just look at me." Klaus performed first. He was technically perfect, hitting every note with precision. The audience applauded enthusiastically. It was a strong performance, no doubt about it. Then came Yuki. Elena watched from the wings as her former rival walked onto stage with that same confident stride she remembered. Yuki had chosen Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3, a brutally difficult piece. And she played it brilliantly. Her fingers flew across the keys, her expression fierce and focused. The audience was mesmerized. When Yuki finished, the applause was thunderous. Elena felt her confidence crumbling. How could she possibly compete with that? The stagehand touched her shoulder. "Miss Chen, you're up." Elena's legs felt like jelly as she walked toward the stage. She could hear the murmur of the crowd, thousands of people waiting to judge her. The stage lights were blindingly bright. The orchestra members watched her expectantly. The conductor gave her a kind smile. She found Adrian in the front row, just where he said he would be. He nodded at her, his eyes full of belief and love. Elena sat at the piano and adjusted the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys. This was the same piece she had played when she won the Tchaikovsky competition, as Elena Morrison. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. The piece that had defined her career, the piece that felt like it was written into her soul. But this time was different. This time she wasn't Elena Morrison, the pianist who had everything. She was Sophie Chen, the woman who had lost everything and rebuilt herself from nothing. She was playing not just for recognition or fame, but for survival, for dignity, for love. The conductor raised his baton. The orchestra began the opening bars, and then it was time. Elena's hands came down on the keys. From the first note, she knew something was different. This wasn't just technique anymore. This wasn't just muscle memory or training. This was her soul pouring out through Sophie's hands. Every struggle, every humiliation, every moment of doubt and fear and hope, it all flowed into the music. She played the opening theme with a tenderness that made people lean forward in their seats. When the piece built to its first climax, her hands attacked the keys with a passion that came from months of being invisible, being mocked, being told she was worthless. The angry, powerful chords weren't just notes. They were her voice finally being heard. The famous cadenza in the first movement, the solo passage that every pianist dreads, came flowing out of her like breathing. Her fingers moved so fast they blurred, but every note was crystal clear, perfect. She wasn't thinking anymore. She was just feeling, just being. The second movement was pure heartbreak. She played it thinking of her old life, of waking up in a body that wasn't hers, of losing everything she had worked for. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop. The melody was so beautiful it hurt. And then the final movement. This was triumph. This was a woman who had been knocked down and got back up. This was Sophie refusing to stay invisible. The rhythm was driving, relentless, building and building toward the final climax. Elena's whole body was involved now, swaying with the music, her arms reaching high for the huge chords, her fingers dancing through the intricate passages. She could feel the orchestra behind her, playing their hearts out, caught up in the same emotion. The final section came, the part where the piano and orchestra come together in one massive, overwhelming surge of sound. Elena threw everything she had into it, every last bit of strength and passion and love. Her hands were flying, her heart was pounding, and she felt like she was on fire. The last chord rang out, massive and final, echoing through the hall. Silence. Complete, total silence. Elena sat frozen at the piano, her chest heaving, tears running down her face. Had she messed up? Had she failed? Then the audience exploded. People leaped to their feet, screaming and cheering. The applause was deafening like thunder. Some people were crying. The orchestra members were standing too, tapping their bows on their stands in appreciation. The conductor turned to her with tears in his eyes and bowed. Elena stood up, her legs shaking so badly she could barely walk. She bowed, and the cheering grew even louder. She looked for Adrian and found him standing, his face wet with tears, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. The judges deliberated for 45 minutes while the 3 finalists waited backstage. Klaus was confident. Yuki was calm. Elena just felt numb, drained of all emotion. Finally, they were called back onto the stage. The head judge, a distinguished elderly woman who had won this same competition 50 years ago, stepped forward with an envelope. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's competition was one of the finest we've ever witnessed. All 3 finalists showed exceptional talent. However, there can be only one winner. She opened the envelope. The Leeds International Piano Competition first prize goes to Sophie Chen. Elena's mind went blank. She heard the words but couldn't process them. People were cheering. Adrian had jumped up and was shouting with joy. Yuki was the first to come hug her, tears in her own eyes. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard," Yuki whispered. "You deserved this." The next hour was chaos. Photographers, reporters, competition officials, everyone wanted to talk to her. They handed her a check for $50,000, offered her a recording contract, and told her she would be performing in concert halls around the world. But all Elena could think about was getting to Adrian. Finally, the officials let her go, and she ran down from the stage straight into his arms. "You did it," he said, holding her tight. "I knew you would. I couldn't have done it without you. You made me believe it was possible." Adrian pulled back to look at her face. "Sophie Chen, you just won one of the most prestigious piano competitions in the world. What do you want to do now?" Elena thought about it. 6 months ago, she had been Elena Morrison, at the top of her field but somehow empty. Then she became Sophie, losing everything but discovering what really mattered. Now she was someone new, someone who had earned every bit of success through hard work and courage. "I want to keep playing," she said. "I want to inspire other people like Adrian Blackwood's charity inspired me. I want to show everyone that it doesn't matter where you start in life. Talent and determination can take you anywhere." "That sounds perfect," Adrian smiled. "But first, there's something I need to ask you." He got down on one knee right there in the backstage area, with competition staff and musicians walking past, with the chaos of victory swirling around them. "Sophie Chen, I fell in love with you when you were supposedly just a maid in my house. I fell deeper in love watching you fight for your dreams. Will you marry me?" Elena didn't hesitate. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." As Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in months. Complete peace. She didn't know if she would ever understand why she had been given the second chance, why she had woken up in Sophie's body, but she was grateful for it, because being Elena Morrison had given her talent. But being Sophie Chen had given her everything else. It had taught her humility, resilience, and the courage to stand up for herself. It had brought her Adrian and showed her what real love felt like. It had proven that your worth isn't defined by your status or your past, but by who you choose to become. 6 months later, Sophie Blackwood gave her first concert as a married woman. The performance was sold out, with people traveling from around the world to hear her play. Before she started, she spoke to the audience. "I used to believe that music was about perfection, about hitting every note exactly right. But I've learned that music is really about truth. It's about taking everything you've lived through, all the pain and joy and struggle, and transforming it into something beautiful. Tonight, I'm not playing as someone who was given everything. I'm playing as someone who lost it all and found something better. This is for everyone who's ever felt invisible, who's ever been told they're not good enough. You are enough. You always were. And then Sophie Chen Blackwood sat down at the piano and played, not for fame or recognition or money, but because music was her voice, her truth, her gift to the world. And as her fingers danced across the keys, she realized that sometimes losing yourself is the only way to find out who you really are.